Eastchester. Not too many people know much about the history of the town they live in. Even here in Eastchester, people are surprised to learn we have so much history. Before 2014, most people did not know that Eastchester is around 350 years old. They also do not know that Eastchester once stretched as far south as the Bronx in New York City and as far north as the Scarsdale border. Mount Vernon was once part of Eastchester as well. The beginning. Eastchester dates back to the year 1664, and that is older than the United States itself. Farmers from Fairfield, Connecticut established Eastchester as a community when they were given a deed for the land from Thomas Pell on June 24, 1664. Thomas Pell had bought the land, known as Long Reach, by the Native Americans for 13 guns, 12 coats, 12 kettles, 12 axes, 2 adzes, a tool used to hollow out wood, and 4 barrels of cider. Some money may have exchanged hands also. The families settled near Eastchester Creek in present-day Mount Vernon, and set up their village green. These farmers may have founded the early village of Eastchester, but they were not the first Europeans to settle there. Anne Hutchinson. Anne Hutchinson beat the farmers to the land. She came here in 1642 with her children and her followers. Anne Hutchinson was forced to leave her home in Massachusetts by a strong Puritan presence there, for having her own views on religion. She settled in what was at the time known as Verdaland. Anne and her followers lived there peacefully. However, Anne's settlement did not last long. She and her followers were attacked by a tribe of Native Americans that had been hurt by the Dutch settlers in the area. It was 10 years after this attack that there was peace again, and another 10 years after that when the land was finally resettled. The Covenant. The farmers that settled the same land as Anne did not have to worry about Native American attacks, because peace had settled between the colonists and the Native Americans and the native populations. This allowed them more time to accomplish what they needed to do with their land. These farmers in 1665 wrote a covenant to explain all that was expected in the town. The covenant was similar to other New England covenants. It started that there would be education for children, that the minister would be taken care of, and many other guidelines surrounding the community. Bill of Rights. Another legal document that many believe came from Eastchester was the Bill of Rights. Eastchester boasts that they are the birthplace of the Bill of Rights. The First Amendment comes from the famous court case that occurred in 1735. The whole situation began in 1733, when an election on the old Eastchester Village Green by St. Paul's Church was taking place. A big scandal took place around the vote for a representative from Westchester County for the New York Provisional Assembly. Publisher John Peter Zinger printed an article that voiced a reporter's opinion of the scandal in the New York Weekly's Journal. His opinion was against the government, which at the time was illegal. This made the royal governor angry, and he had John Peter Zinger arrested. The trial was held at Federal Hall in New York City. The trial attracted a lot of attention, and Zinger was eventually acquitted. The acquittal of this trial set a precedent for the First Amendment, which allows us our freedom of press and civil liberties, such as assembly, religion, and expression. The Revolutionary War in Eastchester. After George Washington fled from Manhattan, he went north to White Plains. Eastchester had become neutral ground, or no man's land, between the British troops in the south and the American troops in the north. Eastchester was raided all throughout its time as neutral territory, either by soldiers or looters that favored either side. The looters that favored the Americans were known as Skinners, and those that favored the British were known as cowboys. Not only was Eastchester often raided, but in October 1776, after the Battle of Pell's Point, the British Army, mostly composed of Hessians, German soldiers that fought for money, left most of its casualties in St. Paul's Church in Eastchester. At the time of the Revolutionary War started, the current St. Paul's Church, which was used as a makeshift hospital, was still under construction. If you look closely at the bell tower of the church, you can see 2 different colored bricks. The lighter bricks are what were put in place before the war started, and the darker bricks show the completion of the church after the war. The Battle on White Plains Road. March 1777. At the top of Winter Hill Road, next to where Immaculate Conception Church is located, there was a group of Americans surprised by a British raiding force. There was a short but bloody fight where 20 Americans were killed, including Captain Samuel Crawford of Scarsdale. Today there is a monument to remember the captain and his men in the intersection of Winter Hill Road and White Plains Road. The men who were killed were buried nearby in unmarked graves. The Marble Capital. Marble croppings were known about in Tuckahoe and worked commercially as early as 1817, but it wasn't until a man named Alexander Masterton came around in 1832 that the industry really began to take off. Masterton, a Scottish immigrant, was a partner in a New York company that received a $3 million contract to repair buildings in Washington, D.C. that had been badly damaged by the War of 1812, which occurred 20 years earlier. Masterton wanted a dependable and accessible source of marble, which he found in Tuckahoe. Many famous buildings have Tuckahoe marble in them, such as the Washington Monument, the Old St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City, Brooklyn Borough Hall, Tweed Courthouse, Washington Square Arch and Washington Square Park, New York Public Library, and Federal Hall. Tuckahoe marble was also used to help rebuild the Capitol building and traveled as far south as New Orleans to be used in the City Hall. The railroad. With more marble being mined, there was a need for the transporting of marble to become easier than having a team of oxen drag marble up to White Plains Road, then all the way down to the docks of Eastchester Creek. That was when the railroad was brought into town, in 1844. The quarry owners and the town raised $15,000 together to bring the railroad to the village. Tuckahoe became one of the original stops and the only regular stop on the New York and Harlem Railroad, which was then owned by Vanderbilt. One thing that makes the Tuckahoe train station special is that in 1910, the railroad station and the surrounding buildings were raised to the present-day levels, and the tracks were then lowered 6 feet. The growth of Bronxville. With the addition of the railroad to Eastchester, more and more wealthy men could move to the countryside and travel into the city every day. One man who moved here in 1890 bought up the land from farmers and other landowners was William Van Duzer Lawrence. Lawrence broke down the land he bought into large plots and slowly started developing Bronxville as we know it. On top of a hill by the Bronxville train station is where Lawrence started building extravagant houses among the tall trees. Today it remains one of the most beautiful and expensive places to live in the country. The Gramerton Hotel. The houses that Lawrence built in Lawrence Park were really desirable to artists and writers, because many of his houses had big skylights with northern light coming through them, something that is very desirable to artists. By 1897, more and more people were coming to Bronxville, so to accommodate these people, Lawrence built the Gramerton Inn. However, after 2 years, the building burned down, and in 1904, Lawrence had built the Gramerton Hotel. Only a little bit of the hotel remains today at the corner of Pondfield Road and Sagamore Road. Lawrence Hospital. Lawrence's influence on Bronxville was widespread. He had contributed so much to the village. He even built Sarah Lawrence College in honor of his wife. Lawrence even contributed $200,000 for the construction of the Lawrence Hospital because he wanted a hospital closer to home after his son Dudley almost died on his way to the hospital in New York City. Eastchester Fire Department. Until 1927, all firemen were volunteers, but before there were even fire companies in town, fires had to be put out by semi-organized groups of neighbors or shopkeepers, or by a line of people passing buckets to the people closest to the fire. Water would be taken from wells or cisterns until water mains were installed. However, Union Corners in Chester Heights had hydrants in 1890, before the fire companies were even formed. To alert men who worked in the fire companies of a fire, there would be hand-operated bells at the firehouses. The number of rings indicated where the fire was located. Fisher's Tavern was also the headquarters for the Union Corners Hose Company. A horse and equipment were kept here with the old fire gong in the back. Eastchester Police Department. Bronxville was the first to organize a police department in 1897. They started out with just 2 policemen. Tuckahoe came next, and one of its first police officers was a carpenter by trade until he joined the force. Finally, Eastchester formed its own police department many years later. Until then, Eastchester still relied on appointed constables who took time off from their real job to go on duty. When Eastchester finally formed a police force, there were only 4 men to begin with. One of those 4 men was Joseph L. Langan. Eastchester's police department now has around 53 police officers. Marble Schoolhouse. The Marble Schoolhouse was a 1-room schoolhouse that was built out of Tuckahoe marble at Devonia Road and White Plains Road in Mount Vernon in 1835. Children from present-day Bronxville, Tuckahoe, Eastchester, and part of Mount Vernon all went to the Marble Schoolhouse. In 1869, the schoolhouse was moved to where it is now, near the California Road and New Rochelle Road intersection. There, the schoolhouse would continue to be used until 1884. In 1959, the Eastchester Historical Society was formed in order to protect the Marble Schoolhouse. When the Historical Society acquired it, the building was in poor condition. Its floorboards, shutters, some doors, and other miscellaneous fixtures are from Fisher's Tavern, which was torn down in 1960 when New Rochelle Road was widened. Today, the Marble Schoolhouse is the home of the Eastchester Historical Society and a library for historical records, which was built behind the school in 1982. Fun facts. In 1776, General George Washington stayed at Union Tavern in present-day Mount Vernon to escape the cold for 3 nights. When Union Tavern burnt down in 1887, Colonel Fay and another boy went looking around the rubble. They found and gathered about 24 silver Spanish coins, dating back to 1687. Another boy, William Hodge, found 23 Spanish coins worth $20 each. Eastchester became the capital of the United States in October 1797 for about a month, when yellow fever was going through Philadelphia, which was the capital at the time. John Adams was the president at the time. He and his wife moved in with their daughter during their time in Eastchester. Abigail Adams commented that Eastchester was a very boring place. President John Quincy Adams' son drowned in the Long Island Sound. His body washed up on the shore of Eastchester Creek, and he was buried at St. Paul's Church. President John F. Kennedy lived in Bronxville for a couple years as a child during the 1930s. Richard Nixon came to Eastchester when the Veteran Memorial was dedicated on October 23, 1972. Tuckahoe once had a rubber factory called Hodgman Rubber that helped the war effort during World War II. Tuckahoe also had one of the first cotton mills in the country. The movie theater in Tuckahoe, known as the Itch, located where the Chase Bank is now, collected rubber and metal during World War II. Those who brought some scrap metal or rubber got to see a movie for free. Where Tuckahoe High School is now used to be the Allendale Racetrack. Waverly Square used to be known as the Irish Alps because most of the Irish immigrants working in the quarry lived there. Town Hall used to also hold the library, but before that it was a country club. The Generoso Pope Foundation is where Tuckahoe Village Hall, the library, police station, jail, and a bank were once housed. During Prohibition, the fire truck in Chester Heights was used to bring alcohol to Fisher's Tavern. The Tuckahoe Eastchester Girl Scout cabin was built in 1958. The cabin was built using only funds raised from selling Girl Scout cookies, making it known as the house that cookies built. Sources: the Eastchester Historical Society collections and Robert Kramer's 300th anniversary book. This is not all of Eastchester's history. This is just the shortened version. Girl Scout Gold Award. This book was made for the Eastchester's 350th anniversary, as well as for the Girl Scout Gold Award. once known as the Golden Eagle of Merit. The Girl Scout Gold Award is the equivalent of the Boy Scout Eagle Award. Each girl must complete 90 hours towards her project. She must do it all by herself with no help from her Girl Scout sisters. The Girl Scout cannot simply raise money for another organization. Finally, her project must have a global outreach of some sort and live on past her. For more information about Eastchester's history, please feel free to visit the Eastchester Historical Society website.